What has been your I told you moment? My ex. We remained good friends. Nothing more. Started dating someone. After he introduced us, he asked me what I thought of her and I said I had a bad feeling and to be careful. The more I got to know her, the more I told him she's bad news. He laughed it off trying to say I'm just saying that cause I still have feelings for him. I didn't. Few years later, he's having to get legal representation. She destroyed his business, his family, stalked and harassed him and even had him under investigation by the FBI. Took him a couple years to clean up the whole mess. I totally said I told you so. I'm curious about how you sensed the red flags in her. I don't know. I just felt really uncomfortable around her. Ever meet someone and right away you feel a connection and want to get to know that person? With her it was the complete and total opposite. I have another friend that completely trusts my intuition. He would always introduce me to a girl when they started dating, and if I said I didn't like her, he'd drop her, and would later find out something where he was thankful to dodge that bullet. When he met the woman who is now his wife, I literally fell in love with her immediately. She's incredible. I wish I had that same kind of sixth sense with the men I choose to date. LOL. I used to work at Starbucks. A customer came in and ordered a drink, I forget which, without ice. I warned them that the drink would only be as cold as the ingredients were from sitting in the fridge, and that the drink would be room temp within a few minutes. They said that was fine. I make the drink, hand it off, and what does the customer come back to the counter 5 minutes later and say? My drink isn't cold. I told you so. Sandra. It's always the Sandras. My aunt gave me pet frogs when I was 13. I didn't ask for them and had no real clue about their care aside from the paper from the pet store, which I know can be sketchy. So I did my own research, starting with how to sex them. I found out pretty quickly that one of them was female and my parents refused to believe me no matter what I did because the pet store said. Summertime rolled around, mating season, and I woke up to them piggybacking around the tank and laying eggs all through the water. The biggest I told you so of my childhood. I was completely enraged that they dismissed me completely despite having done none of their own research. They laid eggs every summer until they died and I considered my dad having to clean it karma. I have nearly the exact same story from my childhood, including my parents not believing my frogs were ucking. The eggs would eventually hatch and I would try to raise the tadpoles into frogs, but whenever they started growing legs, they would all die. If I left them in the tank too long the parents would eat them, comma. For a second there I thought you said your parents would eat them if you left them in the tank too long. I was 8 months pregnant and I started having contractions. I went to the OB and told them something was wrong, and they needed to get the baby out. They tested me for hours and was going to discharge me. I refused to leave and told them something was wrong. The doctor agreed to one last test and found the baby's heartbeat was getting weaker and they wheeled me into the OR 10 minutes later. My daughter was born with no heartbeat and had CPR done for 2.5 minutes before she was resuscitated. I looked at that doctor and said I told you something was wrong. The pediatrician said if I had waited even another half hour we would have lost her. She's 8 now and perfectly healthy. Damn. I went to the hospital twice saying my water broke and both times the doctor said I was just peeing myself. She was born 59 hours after it broke, had pooped in there, and wasn't breathing. I told you I wasn't peeing myself. They were able to suction out her lungs and get her going. The doctor who saved her said she took a year off his life. She's 12 now and totally fine too. Glad you stuck up for yourself. It took me until the second kid to do the same. Glad you have a healthy one. Freaking doctors. A month before she was born I lost vision in my left eye for hours. Turned out the doctor missed the symptoms of preeclampsia. I told my brother he should probably date his girlfriend longer than a year before proposing. 2 months after the wedding she said she wasn't ready to be married and divorced him. Saya aim. First time he married an alcoholic. Even though we all asked him several times if he was sure, we didn't know she was an alcoholic. Just that something wasn't right. He totally knew. Second time he dated her for 9 months before getting married. Are you sure? You haven't known her long? 3 months later and she wanted out. and kinda turned out to be a bit crazy. When I was young and still living with my parents, there were a lot of squirrels in our neighborhood. One morning, I was pulling weeds in the front yard when I heard the sounds of squirrels moving around, coming from the ceiling of the porch, just under our attic. I told my dad immediately, but he was absolutely sure that I was just hearing squirrels on the top of the roof and there was nothing to worry about. This happened a few more times over the summer, but each time my parents said they couldn't possibly in the attic. Cut to several months later, during a peaceful Sunday morning breakfast, when what can only be described as a ball of loud, angry squirrels thumped down in between the walls of our kitchen. We listened to them trying to climb back up and squabbling with each other for hours until a pest control guy came and got them out, confirming that they had entered through a hole on the roof and set up a nest in the attic, which fell into the cavity between the walls. I've never felt so vindicated in my life. All squirrels were safely removed and relocated outside. Halt. Vindicated Ioun. My mom and I were driving out of state someplace when her car, 79 feet Bronco, started to hesitate and almost stall. I told her it was probably the fuel filter, but as far as she was concerned, I was a just teen who didn't know anything. So she pulls into some hick garage. Guy gives her some story about it probably being a blocked catalytic converter. Cleaned it out while we had to wait an hour or so. Charged her $100 plus bucks. This was in the 80s. And sent us on our way. About an hour down the road, same thing again. She pulls into another place. This time I spoke up about the fuel filter. Guy agrees that might be what it is. Pops off the air cleaner. Takes off the fuel filter going into the carb. Then tries to blow into it like a whistle. Clogged. Grabbed a new one. Put it on in like 2 minutes. Charged something like $20. And we had no problems after that. I even tried telling her earlier that exact same problem happened when my dad was driving it one time and that's what was causing it. But she wanted nothing of it. I started having issues with the Fiat Punto. Every so often, I'd try to accelerate and nothing would happen. The engine revved up but the car didn't speed up. Almost as though it was in neutral. I told my wife that I thought there was a problem with the clutch and she called her ex-mechanic father. Over the course of a weekend, he replaced the battery, air filter, spark plugs, you name it, but refused point blank to believe it was the clutch. Ended up having to just deal with it for a couple of months until I could book the Mo service. First thing the mechanic says, the clutch is so far beyond duct, it's a miracle the car was even drivable. Not wanting to knock you, but from what you say, sounds pretty obvious it's probably the clutch. The ex-mechanic father should probably stay an ex-mechanic. Why would he think it's the battery? Kid in primary school loved to prove everyone wrong. Tried to prove rubbing salt in an open wound doesn't hurt. He screamed. When my mom told me that my brother had been hospitalized for poor mental health, I had been trying for years to get him health insurance and mental health care because we experienced childhood trauma. She never listened. Always said everything was fine. He was fine. Now he is 19 years old and struggles to keep a job. Struggles with addiction. Struggles with his mental health. I have been telling her for years to help him before he one day dies. Hopefully his previous hospitalization will be a new leaf for change. This is sad because everyone should have the ability to receive treatment. Mental health is such an important part of who we are and it's often discarded because it's not a real illness. Went over to a friend's house in college and her dad was sleeping on the couch. She said, oh yeah, he's been sleeping there for like a year. He has a bad back. I was like, my mom has a bad back and she saved up and bought a new mattress rather than sleep apart from my dad. Your dad's been kicked out of the bedroom. She didn't believe me. 2 months later it comes out her dad was cheating on her mom. The only person surprised about it was my friend. I mean, that's really upsetting stuff. It was definitely a bit of protective denial with your friend. I saw some suspicious stuff when I was a kid that my dad explained away with some really flimsy stories, and I genuinely just rolled with it because the alibi was so comforting and didn't turn my life upside down. Looking back after the truth came out that he was cheating, I was definitely dumb to believe anything else. Oh yeah, he's been sleeping there for like a year. He has a bad back. My first thought was BCH, if he been sleeping for a year he's a corpse. Told my mum that I felt sick after accidentally eating her crunchy nut cereal and that I was worried I was allergic to nuts. She told me that she allergy tested me as a baby and I was not allergic to anything. Told her that allergies can change and asked for a second allergy test. She told me I was overreacting. Few years later, I had an ear infection. Got put on antibiotics. Had a whole body rash. Everything was red and swollen. Got admitted to A&E. Told by doctors that I was allergic to amoxicillin, the most common form of antibiotic. Told her about the incident and was told once again that I was overreacting because she had me tested as a baby. Same year. Ate Thai food with peanuts. Vomited and had a swollen throat. Roommates were so worried that they offered to take me to A&E but I declined. Told my mum once I had recovered. Still didn't believe me. Last year, I ate some chicken. Only had one bite before my boyfriend realized it had peanut butter in the sauce and forbid me from having another bite. Lips swelled up and my stomach was so badly affected that I had to stay in bed for the night. But mum finally believes me. But I do genuinely believe that she only thinks that because my boyfriend was a witness. I hate to be that guy, but if you haven't already you should go get an allergy test on your own to see what else you're allergic to. It could help you avoid other incidents like this and get you access to an EpiPen. No worries on being that guy. I'm already trying to get allergy tested because I'm worried about what I could potentially be allergic to and I'd love to have an EpiPen for peace of mind. It's a bit tricky in the UK, especially with COVID. But I've gone to the doctors and spoken to a couple nurse friends and unless I'm having a reaction, they won't test me without having to go through about 4 different channels. For an immediate test, it's done through private healthcare. I just have to wait until I have the money. Thanks for the concern though. When it was confirmed that I had epilepsy and I wasn't faking it like my mom thought, TBH I'm still pissed. Billy, why aren't you enjoying the rave? I paid a lot of money for these tickets, now you need to stop writhing around on the floor or we're going home. Let the bodies hit the floor, let the bodies hit the floor. My wife's mother always told her she was being overly dramatic and making it up that her periods hurt. Everybody's period hurts. Stop whining. After we got married I encouraged her to see an actual doctor. Was rapidly diagnosed with endometriosis. Life is so much better for her now that, thanks to actual medication for a professionally diagnosed condition, she just has unpleasant periods instead of curl up in the bed with 3 heating pads whimpering for a week once. Do you have idea what medication or treatment? I have a friend who is struggling with that and she can't seem to find a good treatment to help her, She's currently on a fairly low dose birth control pill. It's knocked her down to a manageable 3-day period about every other month. My mom said she could walk downstairs after spraining her ankle. I said hell no, she broke her leg. Had a friend who always rode BMX with his headphones in, with the volume so loud he couldn't hear anything. On a few occasions he couldn't hear us shouting things like car or don't go shit like that, and almost hurt us or himself. He crashed into me after I fell, because he couldn't hear people shouting stop, and I flipped out and told him that one of these days he was going to really hurt someone or himself. A week later he rode directly out of a friend's driveway and got blindsided by a car. He was fine, save some cuts and bruises, but his bike was destroyed and he broke her windshield. Her lawyer basically proved it was his fault and he had to pay for the whole thing. He never wore Beats again. I fucking told you, you idiot. I fucking hate cyclists with no situational awareness. Reminds me of that video where the cyclist goes right into the back of a parked van because they couldn't be asked to pay attention. I hope your friend hurt himself badly enough to learn the lesson. I feel such pity for these types. They'll never become proper adults. My best friend for 17 years was like this. Nothing was ever his fault or responsibility, and he was dumb as a brick. One time, a friend was going to get us into a theme park for free. All this guy had to do was tell the guard at the security entrance that we were there to pick up an employee by name. He pulls up. The guard asks if we are here for an employee. He says no. Guard tells us to go to the public entrance instead. We end up having to pay to get in. He doesn't understand why we're mad at him. You really shouldn't eat egg salad from the gas station. But I like egg salad. You can't mess up egg salad. Okay. But somewhere between 6 and 12 hours later you're going to regret it. He regretted it. Space worms. Hey. Is this a Futurama reference I see? Kind of sad story, and I refrained from saying it in the end. But, my roommate had a cat for years, and when I moved in her BF had a dog. They got along swimmingly. They decided to get another dog they saw on Craigslist, and within 2 hours of finding the post, the dog was in our house. She is a border collie Australian Shepherd mix. The cat was then unseen for 2 weeks, hiding in the couch somehow. On New Year's, roomies were gone, and I heard growling from the kitchen. She had pinned the cat in the corner, about to attack, so I made the dog leave so the cat could escape. I told them of the incident, and that it wasn't a good idea for the new dog to be here. They ended up just making the cat live in a single room for 6 months while the new dog had free reign of the rest of the house. One day I get a call from my roomies, and apparently the cat tore through the window screen and was in the backyard. They came home and let the dogs out. Apparently the cat put up a major fight, cause the collie mix was covered in scratches, but the dog ultimately won. They found the poor kitty laying there dead in the backyard a few minutes later. The BF came up to me and said, "You were right. R.I.P. little kitty." Irresponsible pet owners are the worst. Just because you want them to get along doesn't mean they will. Sorry you had to go through it, and for the kitty, that's a tough way to go. This is horrific. That is literally animal abuse. They kept their pet in an unsafe environment which resulted in its death. That poor kitty must have been living a scared and limited life because of their bad decisions. I personally think they should be reported and not allowed pets if they are that irresponsible. That dog is also not safe and needs behavior training and should not be allowed on the streets if it kills cats without expert training. This is really yucked up, and it hurts that people who treat animals this way are allowed to keep pets. I told my father that if he kept acting abusive she'll leave. She left. I also told him, if you take a gun to court you could get arrested. He was arrested. I told him, if you drink while driving you could get into an accident. He lost his truck. I told mom to answer the doctor's questions seriously. She spent 2 weeks in a mental hospital. I told mom that if you deny me as your child publicly then I can't help you when you need me. It took a drive, a court advocate, and 2 witnesses to clear that up. I told mom to leave me as public advocate / next of kin so I could help my brother. He has autism. When she passed, he lost $60,000. But hey bro, and I fixed that in enough time to keep his house. Some people aren't heard, period. I still remember the violent argument between my mom and her doctor when, after I showed up to see her in the psych ward, and the doctor suddenly said, "Oh, thank God you have another son that can help you." She exclaimed, "He is not my son," and slapped me. The doctor's face was hilarious. Listen, people, it could save your life, or, more importantly, make you some money.